The Forgotten Cabin. In the dense woods of Oregon, there stood an old, forgotten cabin. It was said to be abandoned for decades, but locals often whispered about strange lights and sounds emanating from it at night. Curious, Emily and her friends decided to investigate, convinced it was just an old wives' tale. They arrived at the cabin at dusk, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth. The door creaked open with a push, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with dust and cobwebs. As they explored, they found odd carvings on the walls and old photographs scattered across the floor. One picture caught Emily's eye. It was of a family, but their eyes were scratched out. As night fell, the atmosphere grew colder. A sudden draft extinguished their lantern, plunging them into darkness. Emily fumbled for her flashlight, but when she turned it on, she saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, watching them. She screamed, but the figure disappeared as the others rushed to her side. They decided to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. Panicked, they heard footsteps above them, as if someone was pacing. Then, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the cabin, followed by silence. Terrified, they huddled together, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, the cabin shook violently, and the floor beneath them gave way. They fell into a hidden basement, filled with old, rotting furniture and the stench of decay. In the dim light, they saw the source of the smell, skeletal remains, bound and gagged. Emily felt a cold hand on her shoulder and turned to see a ghostly figure of a woman, her eyes hollow and empty. The apparition whispered, "Leave this place," before vanishing. The door above them burst open, and they scrambled out of the basement, fleeing into the night. As they reached the safety of their car, they looked back to see the cabin engulfed in flames, as if purging itself of its dark secrets. They never spoke of that night again, but the memory haunted them, a reminder of the horrors lurking in forgotten places. The Cursed Doll. In a small town in Louisiana, there was an antique shop known for its peculiar items. Among them was an old porcelain doll, dressed in a Victorian gown, with eyes that seemed to follow you around the room. The shop owner, Mrs. Thompson, warned everyone that the doll was cursed, but most dismissed it as a marketing ploy. One day, a young woman named Jessica, intrigued by the doll's eerie beauty, decided to buy it. She took it home and placed it on her mantelpiece. That night, she began to hear whispers, but when she checked, the house was silent. Over the next few days, the whispers grew louder, and objects in her home started to move on their own. Jessica confided in her friend, Mark, who was skeptical but agreed to stay over one night. As they sat in the living room, the temperature dropped suddenly, and the whispers returned, now clearer and more menacing. Mark's face turned pale as he saw the doll's eyes glowing red. In a fit of panic, Jessica grabbed the doll and threw it into the fireplace. The flames roared, but the doll remained unscathed. Suddenly, it levitated out of the fire and floated towards them. A ghostly figure emerged from the doll, a young girl with a twisted, malevolent smile. The ghost revealed that she had been wronged in life, cursed to reside in the doll until she could exact her revenge. She lunged at Jessica, who screamed and collapsed. Mark, terrified, grabbed a nearby mirror and held it up to the ghost. The apparition shrieked and recoiled, vanishing into the doll. Realizing the doll was a conduit, Mark smashed it with the mirror. The doll shattered, releasing a dark, smoky entity that dissipated into the air. Jessica regained consciousness, but she was never the same. The experience left her haunted, a reminder of the malevolent spirit that had tormented her. The Silent Town. In the heart of the Nevada desert, there was a town called Silent Pines. It was once a bustling mining town, but now it was abandoned, its streets empty and its buildings in disrepair. The locals believed the town was cursed, and few dared to venture there. Tom, a paranormal investigator, decided to explore Silent Pines, convinced it was a gold mine of supernatural activity. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, he set out to document his findings. As he entered the town, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread, but he pressed on. The town was eerily silent, with not even the sound of wind to break the stillness. Tom wandered through the streets, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. He entered the old saloon, where the air was thick with dust. As he looked around, he noticed a shadowy figure standing at the bar. When he approached, it disappeared. He continued his exploration, each building revealing more signs of the town's tragic past. In the old church, he found a diary belonging to the town's pastor. The final entry spoke of a dark force that had taken over the town, driving the residents to madness and despair. As night fell, Tom set up his equipment in the town square. He began to hear whispers, growing louder and more frantic. His cameras captured fleeting glimpses of figures darting through the shadows. Suddenly, a loud bell rang out, though the church bell had long been broken. Tom felt a cold hand grip his shoulder, and he turned to see a ghostly figure of a miner, his face contorted in agony. The apparition spoke of a curse placed on the town by a vengeful spirit, seeking retribution for a grievous wrong. The curse had trapped the souls of the townspeople, condemning them to eternal torment. Terrified, Tom tried to leave, but the town seemed to shift and change, leading him in circles. The whispers grew into screams, and ghostly figures closed in on him from all sides. In a final desperate attempt, Tom recited a prayer he had found in the pastor's diary. The apparitions paused, then vanished, leaving the town in silence once more. Tom fled Silent Pines, vowing never to return. His footage was never released, but he carried the memory of that night with him, a haunting reminder of the curse that still lingered in the ghost town. The Vanishing Room. In an upscale New York City apartment building, there was a rumor of a mysterious room that appeared and disappeared at random. Residents spoke of hearing strange noises and seeing shadows in the hallway, but no one had ever found the room. Intrigued, a writer named Daniel moved into the building, hoping to uncover the truth. For weeks, Daniel heard the stories but experienced nothing unusual. Then, one night, he noticed a faint light seeping from a crack in the hallway wall. He pushed on the wall, and a hidden door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The room was sparsely furnished, with only an old wooden chair and a dusty mirror on the wall. As Daniel entered, the door slammed shut behind him. He tried to open it, but it was locked from the outside. Panic set in as he realized he was trapped. Suddenly, the room began to change. The walls seemed to pulse and breathe, and the mirror showed not his reflection, but a dark, twisted version of himself. The doppelganger in the mirror grinned and spoke, revealing that the room was a portal to another dimension, a place where evil thrived. Daniel watched in horror as his reflection stepped out of the mirror and approached him. The doppelganger whispered that it had been waiting for someone to take its place, to escape the room and wreak havoc in the real world. Daniel struggled, but the doppelganger overpowered him, forcing him into the mirror. Trapped in the mirror, Daniel saw his double exit the room and disappear into the building. He screamed, but no one could hear him. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel realized he was now part of the room's curse, destined to lure another unsuspecting soul to take his place. The room vanished, reappearing only when it sensed a new victim. Daniel's only hope was that someone would discover the truth and break the cycle, freeing him from his prison. Until then, he remained trapped, a silent observer of the evil that his doppelganger unleashed upon the world. These stories are crafted to evoke real fear and suspense, avoiding cliché horror elements and aiming for a deeper, psychological impact.